Good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure. I hope you had all a fantastic lunch break and are now as excited as we are to do this session together. As Olga already stated before we started, this will be an interactive session, so we are definitely asking you to work also and to work with us together. We are going to share some insights from our Digital Incubator for Museums program. But we will also introduce our
recording in progress
in more detail and ask you also to share some insights in this field from your sector and discuss this in the group. Before we start, I actually want to introduce us. My name is Veronica Libre. I'm working for Ars Electronica since more than 12 years now, specifically in European collaboration projects. I'm the director of European collaboration at Ars Electronica, doing very much actually projects in the field of artistic innovation, also the role of artists in innovation. And I'm here with my fantastic colleague.
I'm Olga. I work for the Vienna-based organization, which is called Museum Booster. As you can tell from the title, I work with museums internationally. I'm the research curator of the Future Museum project and also the head of strategic development at Museum Booster. I guess that's a short version.
And we're actually missing our sister organization. So we are three in this group, in this endeavor. We are working with EXIDE, the European Network for Science Education and Museums. So it's the three of us doing the DOORS program since a year, and it will be 1 year additional journey. Before we start, just a reminder also, and a warm welcome to the online crowd. We have, of course, also online participants joining. Please also join actively in the chat, and we have some colleagues here facilitating also the questions from the chat. Also a reminder to the inclusive guidelines of Europeana, we have put here also the link again on the My Report.
So let's be mindful and move into basically what lies ahead of us today. This is a very simple outline of what lies ahead within this hour. We'll have a little icebreaker. Then we'll move into the introduction. So what is it, DOORS, that you're encountering now? Why self-reflection tool? Why did we go for it? The first interactive exercise, some insights from the DOORS on the process of designing a self-reflective tool, and then sharing is caring exercise will close our session today. Let's move at the pace of trust. We'll move as far as we will allow each other. So it is in our hands to make it a great session. And we wanted to start with the little icebreaker. We introduced ourselves, and because we will arguably work together a little bit today, we want you to introduce yourselves as well. Let's go in a little round, and sorry, Peter, I'll ask you to be the first one. We ask you to pinpoint to do 3 stations. It's a name check-in, where do you work? And because we're talking about the digital in the realm of museums specifically, could you please specify in 1 sentence, in your current role, in your institution, or whatever practice you are embracing at this moment, what is your relationship to digital, in an essence? Yeah, I think this would be
it's
it.
Working better. My name is Peter Soemers. I don't work anymore. I'm retired, but I'm collaborating and doing things in the Europeana network. Yes, it's time consuming. I'm chair of the communicators. I'm in the council. My relationship to digital, it has both sides. It is enabling a lot. I started with Twitter, learned about museum curators, came in touch with them. But now also I hate this division between digital and analog. That's a little bit from 10 years ago. And that is something we need to work on that.
Let's work on that. Thank you, Peter. Can you pass the box to your fellow man?
Yeah. So hi, I'm Tomasz Parkoła. I work at Poznań Supercomputing and Networking Center, which is a research and development center in Poznań in Poland. And well, my role, shortly saying, we are technology providers, so we develop technology because we are IT-focused institution. Yeah, so that would be the short summary.
Shortly is very appreciated, thank you. And we also engage our online crowd to put it in the chat, please. This is why the chat exists in the Zoom environment. So please do the very same exercise, 3 stations. And we move to the next person.
Yeah, I'm Leonie. I work for Europeana. I'm a web developer building the Europeana.eu website, actually. So yeah, I'm making sure that all looks good and is user-friendly.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Loa. I am a history teacher, and if you in Iceland, sorry, maybe I should say that. So I work at high school level or gymnasium level, and yes, of course, my relationship with digital is, of course, there is a lot going on, and we were just also the whole school system everywhere was more thrown into digital during the pandemic. But before, of course, we had digitalized a lot, and yeah. So I don't know what to say more about that. Thank you.
Pass it on, thank you.
Hello, I'm Vibhuti Yadav, and I'm from India originally, and I'm currently doing my master's here in Germany, in a small city called Cottbus, if anybody knows. It's an hour from Berlin, and I'm an architect by background, so digital sort of goes along with my work, and I'm more interested in figuring out how to use digital in architecture with heritage now. So that's my thing.
I saw people throwing this thing. So, and I told you, sitting closer is actually helpful. So.
Hi, I'm Matt Voits, and I work with IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. Currently our organization's 95th birthday today, by the way. So,
congratulations.
but yeah, I work on copyright and open access policy there. So a lot of what I do is trying to ensure the accessibility of digital content and to make sure that content is accessible digitally. So particularly library collections, things that are owned, and increasing the options for that.
Thank you.
So my name is Michiel Kok. I work at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam as head of special collections. And in that role, I'm pushing to improve our digital collections, while at the same time improving what we can do with the analog collections as well.
No worries, no worries. I'm happy to throw and catch. Hi, my name is Jeff Love. I am a research fellow at the Technical University in Delft, just down the railroad tracks from here. And my relationship to digital, I run something we call the Future Libraries Lab. I do a lot of work in, well, what library collections and knowledge in general looks like in the digital world, both for my own research purposes, and I also teach lots of design students, and we try to incorporate digital, in parentheses, culture into that as well.
I feel you're like a relative to me.
So hi, my name is Matilda Justinic. I come from Zagreb, Croatia, National University Library, and I work in the Center for Development of Croatian Digital Library. So we're in all those areas that about digital library, and my biggest interest is actually impact of our collections, how to count it. So that's why I'm here. Okay. Sorry.
Hello, I'm Max Dekkers. I am a independent informational professional. So I do lots of work for different organizations. I was involved with Europeana in the beginning, EDLnet and Europeana version 1. Currently mostly working related to public sector information. So government information and the Public Sector Information Directive, also the Data Act, Data Governance Act in Europe. And I'm really interested in seeing how digital information in different domains can hook up, and especially when we talk about data spaces, I'm really interested to see how in the future we're going to connect all those data spaces to provide integrated services to our citizens.
Hello, I'm Renilde Reinders. I'm from Flanders, Belgium, and I retired last year. But before that, I've been a teacher for 17 years, and after that, I've been working for the European programs for education and training for 26 years. And working in the national agency in Flanders, I had the task also to promote digitalization because for the European Commission it's quite important, and for the field of education too. So I've been doing that, but now I am involved as a volunteer in a project that is building a website around cultural heritage and how lively or how strong is it within communities on a local level.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Guy.
You're a special one.
Okay. My name is Guy Tilkin. I'm the chair of FEST, the Federation for European Storytelling. So I represent storytellers, oral storytellers. And normally, of course, they do it orally. They do it live. But of course, thanks or because of COVID, a number of those storytellers tried to work over the web using Zoom for their stories, for finding a new audience, for trying out what happens if they are not related to the audience in the same room, etc., etc. And of course, a number of storytellers also try to cooperate and do co-creative work with digital artists. So storyteller next to a digital artist, and that's the relationship between oral storytelling and the digital. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Natalie Krall. I'm from Düsseldorf in Germany. I'm a freelance art historian and curator and a solo or self-employed artist liaison, but I'm here in my role as a co-founder of Collector, which is where we developed a browser-based augmented reality viewer that also allows for storytelling, and so I'm here to do some field research and see where the needs are in the field.
Thank you. We're almost there. We're closing the round, but we can see we have a very diverse group today.
Hi, I'm Douglas from Europeana. I'm Collections Engagement Manager, and most of my work with a great team is connecting people with culture in many different ways. What's my relationship to digital? It's complicated.
I think we can relate.
I'm old enough to remember the analog era, so having been part of that at the end of it is, I think, useful for perspectives on where we are now. So, thanks.
Last but not the least.
Hi, I'm Sergio Gordia. I'm working for Austrian Institute of Technology in Vienna, and I'm working in the research group which is called Data Science and Artificial Intelligence, and we have a subgroup which is working to apply data science and artificial intelligence in cultural heritage. So my work is digital by default. Thank you.
Thank you. So the group is indeed diverse.
One more?
Oh, sorry. So sorry.
I'm the least. Well, hi all. I'm Renata from National Library in Croatia. I also work with Matilda in our digital library department, and well, I'm actually responsible for copyright and making sure that collections can go online, and why can they? And it's all very frustrating, but it's also very rewarding. So yeah, that's the digital part.
We'll talk about emotions today. The only thing I would, before Veronica jumps into the introduction of what DOORS is, I will just articulate one more time that DOORS is a project that works specifically with museums. So we will kindly invite you to step in the shoes of the museum realm more, because that's the subject of our project and program in general.
Thank you. Absolutely. Exactly. We are targeting museums. We are targeting specifically an even more particular focus of museums, small and medium-sized museums. Olga and myself both come from a background where we've actually followed over really years, maybe even decades, how challenging it can be actually for museums to apply digital technologies, and also how to blend really systematically and naturally online and on-site, and do not, and as we actually address this also, create actually divide between also online and on-site, digital and analog. We have initiated this program about a year ago. We are doing this under the umbrella and also funding of the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. And as we said, we're doing this in the group of Ars Electronica, Museum Booster and Excite. The overarching aim of DOORS is really to become a European incubator, and I will come back to that, what it actually means in terms of activities, what we are doing here. For, as I said, small and medium-sized museums, we have designed for this a two-stage incubation program, which is ongoing, so we are in the midst of the 2 stages on 4 really specific innovation areas. So we have decided really to focus on these 4 areas, innovating audience analysis and engagement, new content distribution revenue models, and strategies for integrating infrastructures as the third, and experimental information and communication technology programs. All of the museums, and at the very beginning of the program, we invited, or a jury actually selected 40 museums for the first stage of the program. They had to submit a proposal and assign themselves to one of the 4 innovation areas. They are now in the process, and actually today is the deadline for them to submit actually their pilot implementation proposal. So 20 of the 40 initial museums will be selected to actually implement a project based on this. Why we actually selected this 2-stage pilot program is really to initiate a first incubation program where we build together with them also the possibility of a shared understanding, a shared knowledge framework, give them also the confidence of actually implementing a digital pilot, and pair them also with experts who support them in their digital endeavor. We have...
If I may, Veronica,
please,
I'll
yes.
just do one little comment here. We also tried in our little way to hijack the initial idea of providing, just, allocating the funding for 20 pilot projects in the museum. And we thought, so how can we overcome the chronic disease of project-based funding when we're approaching museums, especially such an underrepresented and underprivileged segment of the sector, small and medium scale? Cannot stress enough, this is again the focus area of the project. And we thought that what we could do, we could redistribute a little bit the resources and to move into a bigger cohort of people working on the strategical level, figuring out and doing a research together with them how they can embed a project into a strategical development of their institutions, and focusing incubation stage 1 on strategy development, and only then moving into the tactical, informing our selection criteria, informing what support they might need during the incubation as being a learning curve that is happening collectively. But also we saw that what is the outcome of that is at the end of incubation stage 1, we have to do, the painful exercise of cutting 20 from 40. And then we saw what we could give back to them is we could help them develop the project proposals that they will have an opportunity to have a second and third look together with us, with the workshop leaders, with their peers, with the artists and creative technologists whom we invited on board. And even if they do not get a funding from us, they get a much more sophisticated project proposal that they could reuse and apply to their national funders, to their sponsors, or even reconsider how they could redistribute their internal budgets for this purpose. So that's also a little bit the backbone why we have 2 incubation stages, the strategic one and then the tactical.
In particular, because we are also aware, of course, of our limited funding. So this is the overall scheme. We are providing them really with this 1.5 years incubation program. We are providing them with expertise, with external mentors, and fantastic practitioners actually of the museum sector. And 20 of the museums, as we explained, will then really receive 27,000 euros for implementing a pilot. This is realistically and practically speaking not a lot for a digital pilot, but we are trying to incorporate this in the whole learning so they can actually take something out of the whole process and also apply the learning then to future digital pilots in their organizations. As I said, we have a fantastic group of experts. Of course, we work with a jury who selected out of the 128 proposals we received, and they are now also in the next weeks working on selecting the 20 out of the 40. And we have a advisory board who was not only supporting us in mentoring the museums and is supporting us, but also in how to design actually the whole methodology of the incubation program. The incubation program started with this more strategic dimension, as Olga mentioned, and we invited both the advisory group in supporting us to define this, as well as we actually built it on a whole knowledge framework. On the one side, we did extensive case study analysis and also expert interviews with practices on healthy digital relationships pretty much all over the world. So we looked into cases, how are they actually collaborating between museums, in particular small and medium-sized museums, and digital solution providers. How are they implementing the process? What is actually required for this? This report is also available online, so if you're interested, that's on our DORS website. The other part we did for the foundation of our incubation program is a survey on digital maturity and needs, which was filled out by 286 responders, and really with a particular focus again, and I can't stress this enough because that is our focus, with 86% of small and medium-sized museums. That is the result of our incubation methodology. We have, the first month behind us. We are starting now with the second stage. We are really building the whole program on the notion of collective intelligence. We believe that on the one side, it is extremely important to bring in external expertise, but we actually want to build this whole program really also for allowing the petitioners to exchange. And we also see already from the first stage and the responses and the feedback from the petitioners that it was one of the first, or for many, one of the first programs where they were also allowed and able to really exchange on specific learnings, on fears, also on problems they encounter, on issues in implementing digital pilots, and exactly this peer-to-peer scheme is something we try to facilitate in monthly open hour sessions for them, but also in progress sharing sessions where they can actually present in which stage they are and actually get some help to bring the pilots really into reality. And then we invite also, of course, external expertise. We bring in specific domain workshops, also best practices and case studies we actually want to showcase to them and see what the whole benchmark, what the development possibilities also are in the sector. And at the end, we will have outcomes from the incubation program and the pilot implementation, where they also describe in specific guidelines the whole methodology and the dimensions they needed for the implementation of the pilots, and that will be then also published in November 2023.
All right. So as you can see from the title, the Digital Incubator for Museums, digital is quite vocally present in the title. But in terms of the thinking behind the program, we are not focusing on technology itself that much, rather on the underlying strategies and the value chains that museums have to develop. Because we also believe that a technology-driven approach really risks leading to technology-only reforms, and we know that's not sustainable and it's not time-proof. Veronica, can we go to the next one, please?
Yes.
Sorry, you have to help me. So as we are working with small and medium-scale museums, our cohort is of 40 museums in the incubation stage 1, we really embrace the digital divide, I would say at full scale. And it's important to remind ourselves in the sector that the divide exists between institutions as much as within institutions. And of course, it's a result of a broader digital divide on a societal level. So what we believe in, and we kind of walk the talk, we do a work out loud approach. That's what we do, and that's what we even try to do with you today, later, once we finish this endless introduction, is we need to work together to find meaningful ways to bridge the divides. And you cannot do it just externally, by telling people how you do it. You need to build those methodologies together with the cohort that you are working with. And the last one is, it is part of the digital literacy and maturity to acknowledge attitudes and behaviors, the emotional landscape of the peers and of the professional field, and to understand the kinds of support and care people need. So to move a little bit beyond the formal criteria and to also think about the contextual intelligence and the emotional intelligence of the people we are working with. So it's a little bit the backbone of us also believing in a human-centered museology in this regard. So when we were designing doors, we kind of approached digital maturity through combining business intelligence skills, emotional skills, and digital skills. And this was outlined in the program of the workshops that we held. They were sequential, they had homeworks in between, and the feedback loops embedded, as you've seen in the structure. And the feedback happened between the museums as a peer group, between museums and us as the group of organizers behind it, but also in a group of experts that we invited to devise those workshops for them. And let's go to the next one. The modus operandi for us that we devised as we were en route is we do believe that you need to invest time into the framing conversations that prepare people to approach the exploration of potentially, and it's not potentially, but actually very uncomfortable insights that they have to embrace. We foster in our group the growth mindset that can grasp an opportunity to reach potential instead of the fixed one. We do know that the role of the museums is to preserve, so it is pretty much about being fixed, but how can we still remain true to our missions and to our core obligations, but also to move a little bit more in a flexible way, embracing the challenges of the 21st century that demand being dynamic. And we do invest a lot in making people feel comfortable to participate. It is demanding like hell, time-wise and resource-wise, but otherwise you cannot move forward. That's not exactly possible. We do not manage to reach then the sticky change. What we invited on board, and I'm quoting here Dr. Sophie Frost, who was one of the workshop leaders for the group, is the digital courage. This is the term that she coined, and which is the practice of equality when using technology in a museum context. Can you just give me the next one, please? Sophie developed 4 definitions, but the one that I would like to highlight that is more collaborative and less individualistic than confidence, that we were used to digital confidence as a term being used, and is more person-centered, values-led, and context-based, which again comes back that it cannot be external to the group. We had to invest time into dividing the values and knowing our persons on board before we moved into this shared exercise with them. And I guess that's the moment where we zoom out into our first exercise that we kindly ask you to do with us. When we're talking to museums, like, can you just first show the perspective slide? It is important to remind ourselves that when we operate in our practice, there is a number of lenses and perspectives that we need to acknowledge. So we never alienate ourselves from being humans, right? So this is the personal one. The organizational, we have a role in the institutions that we serve and work in. There are larger networks that are our first community of peers in the field. There is a sector at large that we also are embedded in. And of course, as citizens, we are part of the society. So whenever we do an exercise with our group, we always try to highlight that there is a role in which they ask them to arrive. And this makes already this a little bit more comfortable for them to approach any exercise. So what we're doing today with you, we ask you to enter this conversation with us in a role of collaborators. This is the role that we invite you to, to accept. And we wanted to do with you, I mean, the Miro is available for those joining online, so please feel welcome to fill it in independently. Unfortunately, we're not able to disseminate the link for the Miro for those on site with us here, but this is where we will do it in a dialogue way and we'll put it in. So when we're approaching the self-assessment exercise and we did the first test round with our cohort, the biggest bias or the biggest blocker that we saw was emotional. First of all is the question like, why do I have to self-assess? Or when I self-assess, the emotional background from which people stepped in, people representing institutions, and they never alienate themselves from an individual and the organizational level, they have different expectations what a self-assessment might bring to them. So we have conducted this exercise with our group, and we wanted to, zoom out and to do it with someone with a broader scope of people. What are the emotions that actually might be our starting point in doing a self-assessment? What is it that we might be looking for in this journey? Before we try to find an answer, what kind of envelope the end result might get as a self-assessment. Inhabiting the field where there are no two institutions alike, that's impossible to do a universal formula, right? So we have to embrace like what's happening there. I put in some examples from our discussions with the group, and maybe the thing before we move into the question, and I'll ask you, I'll just highlight that there are there are multiple ways where to start, but they're not necessarily negative. You might not only feel like lost or overwhelmed by the possibilities of the digital technology, but you also might feel inspired and ready to share, being full of the knowledge and expertise or a vision how this might happen, and actually you want to share with your with your peers, with your collaborators, but there is just no structure or no format set in place for you to be able to do this. So this is why in the icebreaker we asked you about your relationship with the digital. This was more in a personal way. If you would be doing a self-assessment exercise, what is the current status quo for you emotionally that would drive you into this? Where do you find yourself in this moment in time and in your institutional or in your practice? You don't want me to point fingers, right? But I can throw it, it's brilliant. I can throw a ball into you. Anyone would like to start? Or we'll have to practice the catch exercise. Okay, I'm doing it, so they just focus. You don't want to get hit.
Oh yeah, could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question is like when you're approaching a self-assessment exercise in terms of the digital, and what digital can do to you, from which emotional background will you step into this, like personally? Where do you find yourself?
I think I'm relatively new to the library sector, the copyright sector. So partially, I draw analogy to sectors I was previously working in academia and with privacy. And so I think there's one part that's kind of looking at how do the questions from one field relate to the current field that you're in. And I think there's also a certain openness to experience in that, and that inquisitiveness about thinking, well, in terms of the emotional state there, about, well, what, we're coming into this space, we're trying to self-assess, we're trying to discover something new. Well, what is fresh about that? What can I bring to that? What do I not know? What am I confused by here?
Would curious and confused be more or less fit enough?
Yes, you could say that. That's an interesting way to put it.
Pick a victim. Pass the ball. Let's share the responsibility of picking a person. Oh, and then we know where it goes further.
Yeah, when I look at what storytellers do, and then at the digital. For us, I have to admit, it's kind of threatening, and it's losing contact. But yes, we feel that we have to move in that direction for several reasons. But if I look at the art of oral storytelling, then really it's difficult. But I have to admit that a number of our storytellers really we like to look at the digital as artistic. So. Artistic digital creations in cooperation with storytelling. And then I would say, yes, the storytellers are curious and even excited. On the other hand, it's something that most of them push away.
Thank you. We had a volunteer. Can you pass on the ball? Thank you.
Yeah, yes. So I've been working a lot with people, let's say, who come from the analog world and move into the digital world. And I think one of the issues there is insecurity and rather than losing control, losing contact, is losing control.
Yeah.
That you give your stuff away to a digital space where you don't have the same kind of control that you had on your analog resources. That's something that I found. So this may be a negative point, but I think that is something you always have to take care of, especially with people who are experts in their field in an analog world and don't feel themselves to be experts in the digital world.
Let's take one more we have here. But it is true, it is very emotional and loaded, like when we approach digital in the cultural sphere.
I mean, personally, I come from the digital world somehow, and I think I can still relate with you because it's overwhelming. There's just so many platforms, right? I mean, there's so many platforms, so many to choose from, and even if you are personally in terms of your professional experience, trying to put yourself out there into trying to find a project or working on a project of your own, there's way too many choices. And what if one of the choices that you've accepted for yourself becomes obsolete at one point of time because there's new things coming up by seconds.
So true. So I'll pick up the box from you. Ronnie, can we go back to the presentation, please?
Yes.
And when we started approaching self-assessment for the museums, I mean, a lot of the emotions that you highlighted are very present, and they're emotionally very loaded. Anxiety, like fear, being overwhelmed, it's hardly positive in a way. So when we were designing, knowing our specific group, once again, small, medium-scale museums in Europe, when we thought that we need to design a tool for them, and we do acknowledge the fact that there is a lot of prejudice and stumbling blocks in people approaching or using self-assessment. So we said, how can we overcome it, or how can we contribute to this one? So I'll just put, we leaned and looked into a number of tools that have been devised, but given that we allowed ourselves this first incubation stage to be context sensitive and then build sensibility towards our particular group, small and medium-scale museums, we still paid due tribute to the tools that have been developed before us. And I just picked up a couple for you to highlight for you. This is the Microsoft's Libraries and Museum Education Transformation Framework that looks at large, like where you're standing. The Digital Culture Compass devised in UK for a broader spectrum of cultural institutions. This is a classical exercise where you go through an exercise and you end up somewhere in a particular category. The next one is, this is the one that you've encountered even on the premises of Europeana this year, again, facing a broader scope of cultural institutions where we, of course, the panoramic overview, the next one. It takes a while. The DASH survey, beyond like looking only into the digital transformation, we looked into more specific ones. DASH, which is a digital attitudes and skills survey, was looking into the emotional background of the UK sector, cultural institution. How does it feel to get digital in an institution where you're not alone, you're embedded in the structure, the structure might not be super flexible. How do you feel? How you can change it? By acknowledging as the sector. We'll also looked into the dimension of, because we're a digital incubator, of digital production, so like piloting cycle. This is the one developed by Nesta. We also looked into the tools that are currently in development or have been developed specifically for museums. MOI is a European project, also the one funded by the European Commission, Museums of Impact. It's a broader scope of what impact is and finding what is the role of digital there as well. Not to exoticize the digital, but just encountering as part of it. Or the Knight Foundation approach towards assessing the digital maturity of museums in the specific context of the US, just to name a few of the ones that we used as an inspiration, as interlocutors, and as, hey, the word best practice, but see, I dropped it.
And the big question is, of course, how does our self-reflection tool look like? We are currently in the midst, so it is work in progress. We have started with the design, and we are also here following an iterative process. So we have finished the first version of it. We are testing it, and we are also going to share some of the learnings from the first test phase, and then we are going to launch a final version by the end of this year. Just a couple of basic principles on how we actually designed this tool and also what kind of principles we followed. It is definitely not a score-based approach. So it is nothing, as you know, in the magazines where you follow a path and you get then a final picture of what you are and where you have to develop to. You have to really work in order to do this self-reflection tool. You also have to bring in colleagues and practitioners from your own organization. We are specifically, again, here targeting in small and medium-sized museums, in particular those who are also at the very beginning of their digital journey. And we designed this tool really to help those organizations to follow a discussion, follow an open discussion, an inclusive discussion on what actually the impact of these digital tools, the digital services they implement in their companies may have on them, on their staff, on their organization, also the fears they potentially associate with it, and see it also as a evaluator, as an analysis for change. We have selected for the tool, and we'll actually show you a couple of dimensions here. We have selected 5 areas of interest for the self-reflection tool, while also acknowledging that those are, of course, not extensive. So one could go in every other possible direction, but for us, strategy, organization, skills, innovation, and openness were the most important ones.
It's also partially because we use the word innovability, which is a combination of innovation and your ability to actually first acknowledge that there is some change that you need to do, but then also acknowledging the fact, what are the resources that are necessary for this to happen. So it's both the willingness, the openness, and then the capacity to actually innovate, and understanding that innovation is not necessarily something new, or it has to come in a technological envelope, but it is something very self-referential, that it has to be innovative for your particular institution, for your particular context. Again, acknowledging the different perspectives that you can apply onto the situation. Sorry, Bernie.
And exactly those kind of evaluations on your resources, on your capacities, is something we have actually put into a set of questions. So each of the 5 areas come with a set of questions, and then also with an explanatory text on what kind of dimensions you can potentially develop to in your own organization. We have specifically actually designed the tool for institutional levels, so it's not focusing on a project level, as actually DOORS is, of course, very much focusing on the pilot implementation itself, but we really believe that the evaluation, the reflection on the institutional level actually supports a more sustainable way of reflection, and also supports future projects. As I said, it is a work in progress. But you definitely want to see, I guess, the tool itself, and we just actually...
It's not the tool, it's because we are in a work in process. We actually piloted and test ran the first self-evaluation framework, self-assessment framework with our cohort, and there was a really strong learning curve for us. And this is why we're really something that we'd like to share. We had to reconsider what we're doing, because basically when you test run, how is it going to be useful and usable for the institution? So by the ones who are filling it in, but by the ones who are doing it together, and then also by the ones who then acknowledge the result of this process as well. So this is the initial structure that we had. We just put it in Miro because it's a process-based. It's a work in process, and because it is process-based, for us, Miro is a tool that is really helpful to work with our cohort. And basically what you're looking at is, it's not the tool because we're going to remake it, but it is an overall structure. Sorry, Veronica.
No, initially, and very frankly, we started with a 35-page PDF, and of course we extracted only the most important things, but this is exactly the state we're in. We're also understanding what, based on, so the first design, the first tool was filled out by the 40 museum practitioners, part of the incubation program, and also by reflecting on how they filled it out, how also they gave us feedback on the tool. We are currently developing this more interactive version of it. As you see, we have embedded the 5 areas here, so strategy, organization, skills, innovation, openness. Each, as I said, comes with a certain number of questions here in each of the areas, and explanatory text. I did not put any of this in the Miro because it would crash completely the time we have today. But just as a understanding, I extracted some parts for each of the question, maybe starting really with the most difficult one, with strategy. And that is a failure from our project. We actually put that as a first question into the self-reflection tool. Absolutely, now we know that this needs to be something which is more towards the end and start then with some intermediary and first primary question.
One of the learnings here, actually, if I may do again a little intervention here, is we abolished also the categorization. So initially we started with, okay, our hypothesis is, and working in the field for really a while already now and knowing how it looks, but mostly working with bigger institutions, we pre-tailored 3 categories where we think institutions would find themselves. But actually when we approached real small and medium scale institutions, we actually understood that our first question is the first obstacle where most of institutions are not finding themselves. So that's our first learning, or our first finding was that maybe we shouldn't start with a hypothesis because we proved ourselves wrong. And it is very disencouraging on emotional level when you start a self-assessment exercise and you do not find yourself in it, like you do not fit. How welcoming is that to continue the journey, which like 5 pages ahead, right? So this was the first one. I guess that's why strategy, we saw that it's one of the challenging ones.
Thank you. Just some of the examples. So for the strategy, we ask questions like, does your organization have digital strategy? And then we go into the very details to guide them and to also allow them to get an idea of where they can potentially develop themselves to. For the organizational question we had, is there a dedicated person or a department overseeing digital maturity? Of course, asking about the leadership's attitudes, but also about if they actually take into consideration the fears, the aspirations, and the anxiety of the staff. For skills, there were specific questions on if the organization is already facilitating digital literacy, if they also dedicate resources to this, and if they also embed the whole community, if they pair up with practitioners, with external partners in the field to support this digital skills. We had one question specifically on innovation and how the organization is supporting digital innovation. And the final question was on openness, specifically targeting how the museums are facilitating synergies also through partnerships, through communities, through co-creation with audiences, with external stakeholders, part of their digital journeys, what kind of digital tools are they using, and not only how they're using it, but also how they're planning and measuring this.
As we have 10 minutes left, Veronica, I think we have to move into our
yes.
question exercise. So, but as we're zooming out, one of the findings that was in practical and emotional terms for us invaluable with our cohort is that first and foremost, it is very demanding to ask institutions to go through a self-assessment. So, of course, it can be only be driven from the inside. But then when you have this urge on an institutional level to do a self-assessment exercise, the thing that we didn't include in our first design, and this is our learning, maybe you were smarter than us in this exercise, for us it was eye-opening, we have to acknowledge that there are can we move to the panel with the squares?
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, this one. This is what we suggest for you to do with us as a little exercise, thinking out loud exercise. So we understood that we need to acknowledge that institutions have the role set up in place. There is, even if we want it or not, if we agree with it or not, there is already a space where digital somehow, as even a discourse or as a challenge, is finding itself in the institution. There is a person eventually whose responsibility it is, and who either by will or by obligation will be allocated with a particular task that might be completely foreign for him or her. On the other hand, when we embrace digital more often and we see the possibilities and when they're less overwhelming than they might appear, we do want them to be more empowering and to build new constellations of the roles. So when designing the new edition of the self-assessment tool, we thought that we will structure it completely differently. This will be a supportive scaffolding for institutions to unlock the space for a conversation that would be horizontal and not linear as the Word doc or like as a PDF eventually that it used to be in the first edition, and that it will allow the individual journey through the tool as you begin to own it as an institution. So the finding that we also find very crucial is that we need to allocate, but to articulate time expectations, how much this exercise will take. Because one of the chronic diseases within the sector is that people are overworked and the tasks such as development and acquiring new skills is underprivileged. It's not part of your working routine, let's put it like this. You're either doing it on the side or like as a voluntarily self-developmental framework. It's rather the benefit of being embedded in a bigger institution than into a smaller one that you do have the time within your working time to develop those skills. So in the new design, we do want to acknowledge the roles. We do want to estimate how much time this will take, but also to devise it in a way that it's conversational and it allows to build new constellations of roles and relationships within the team that would help them define, so where do they stand in terms of digital at this particular moment, and how they see it might be instrumental for them, acknowledging also the frictions of the processes, acknowledging the anxieties, and building in the feedback loop as we had with our cohort. This was absolutely invaluable to have the peer-to-peer scheme, because what the museums gave to each other, and they, as a cohort of practitioners and of people, I think was one of the most enriching exercises actually. Of course, predicated on the workshops in one hand, which was feeding them the skills or a particular level of familiarity with what's there, or like providing them a structure, how they could navigate it. But still, it was the energy of people to people that helped to navigate the first incubation stage as a space. So basically, the roles set up in place, the one that we acknowledge, we've done a study with our group of museums, exactly as part of the self-assessment first round. What are the departments, what are the people, and if they're privileged enough, maybe a group of people set up in the institution that take care of digital, whatever form it takes, be it a digitalization of collection, be it social media, be it sometimes even digital marketing or e-commerce. And then asking, so, okay, if you're doing a self-assessment tool, self-assessment exercise, where would you like to move? What kind of new constellations of relationships and roles would you like to devise together? The red flags and blockers are individual for each particular institution, knowing the structure, coming back to the 5 pillars that you saw. And the blind spots normally exist on the margins of departments or spheres of responsibility, because museums quite often are very siloed institutions, unfortunately. So de-siloing the process would be an unlocking the collaborative and the colloquial of talking about a challenge, acknowledging the emotional background of it would be, I would say, the end goal of the new structure of a self-assessment tool. Veronica, do you want to add something to that? I feel I'm talking too much.
I think we can open it actually.
Yeah, let's do it. With the 5 minutes we have left, the glorious 5 minutes.
So I think the basic principle of our self-reflection tool is something we presented for today, and actually we would like also to invite you what kind of roles you would actually need to design in your own organizations or museums, if you're actually from a museum background, understanding also what kind of team constellations. We all know that in particular digital projects are requiring interdisciplinary across organizations. So this is one of the first things we also designed in our cohort of piloting organizations. What kind of roles, what kind of team constellations would you see as a necessity to implement digital projects in your organizations?
I think it would be helpful if a person working in an institution would actually pick up the ball. Do tell me who gets the ball. We have several libraries here, actually. We do not have museums, as far as I remember the intro round, but libraries are not that far from museums in terms of challenges pertaining to digital. Would any of the libraries would like to take the ball? I know I'm putting you under pressure, I'm sorry. And I do have, I mean, my memory is not that bad. I do remember who works in the library. Or if you can relate, you know, externally, just from your previous experience in the institutions, how hard it is, or what is the blind spot that you encountered in your practice that prevented from an organic flow of exchange, especially if exchange is predicated on not that positive emotions, being anxious, being overwhelmed, being lost, sometimes being isolated from a bigger group of co-workers in terms of building a coherent strategy moving ahead? Are we in a group of happy people who have never encountered such a problem?
Seems so.
That would be a very ideal world, you know? I would love to live in your world. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm reaching back deep into my memory banks when I worked for a national museum in the UK some years ago. I think one of the biggest challenges, I'm not sure it's a blocker, but it's definitely a challenge, is actually to have the value of this kind of thinking and this process understood, recognized, and in some way implemented, because, at least in my experience, many departments, subgroups within museums and maybe other cultural organizations are really sort of super focused on delivery the whole time. It's like, we're doing this today, tomorrow, next week, this year. And there is sometimes kind of limited kind of air or space or time for more contemplative, more reflective practice on, okay, let's actually take some time out, engage in, you know, mentored exercises like this to just check in about why we're doing what we're doing and how we might do it better. So that, I think, is really partly a leadership aspect. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I cannot agree more to that. And again, to highlight just how, like, when working with a group of smaller players in the museum field, we did see how much it is underserved, like allocating the time to be actually able to have these kind of conversations, and then to kind of face the consequences of it as well, and knowing that it is time demanding and it is time consuming. So what we actually did in our incubation stage 1, and what we argued for with the commission when we're designing our program, the initial idea was just to, you know, take the funds, allocate it to 20 pilots, and then to be a little bit like police dogs, looking like how well are you, or how efficiently are you using the resources. We completely restructured this approach, and we chopped off a chunk of the funding to be actually able to allocate the bigger group of museums, the cohort of 40, and to pay them for the time that their colleagues, their workers, are actually dedicating to the study program. That was a little bit the thinking behind designing what DOORS was, and maybe this was, again, the thing that we tried to infect our museums with, that they need to do it also on a more regular basis in their practice. Also, one of the insights that we got from the program, and I will share it very openly, we did get it as a feedback that it would be very helpful for us to embed more leaders from small and medium-scale museums and not only operators, because we do know that there is another silo. You do go to a training program, you meet fantastic people, but are you actually able to share this learning back? Are you actually able to set up or to shift the process that you've got inspired with in your institution when you go back and you face the structure that is so rigid, hierarchized and siloed? That's a very tough job. And that's arguably what the tool humbly is trying to approach as well, because that's one of the new, in one of the feedback loops, we want to incorporate a special setting and a role play where we invite the leader to be present in this kind of conversation, because we see it happening very rarely. I guess we are just ran out of time. So I guess this is the moment to Thank you for being with us, for bearing with two very fast talkers, I guess. And sorry for not doing as much interaction as we wanted. The introduction took a little bit later, but we do appreciate you being with us today. And if you do want to know more about the project, we quite consciously put a lot of things online. So whatever we do, the study, the survey that we held, it's all available on the DOORS website. It is hosted by Ars Electronica. So we could, do we have the website on our...
I think at the very end. 1 second.
Yeah.
Also, we will stay here. So of course, we can exchange contacts, and we'd be happy to send you also the learnings, the reports, etc. via email if you're interested.
Yeah, that's the website where you could find most of it. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.